Hey Wolverines, I'm Alfredo Diaz.
And I'm Adrian Fraga. Welcome to the Fantasy Show for the people, by the people.
And this week's special guest host on the Waiver Wire is Tommy Torres. And Tommy, we're happy to have you this week.
Happy to be here.
And week 5 was a little bit crazy in terms of fantasy and also in the NFL. Kickers had a great day.
Yeah, very sarcastically.
Obviously, but last week our special guest host Adrian Carmona actually had
the best takes.
So if we would like
but
to,
unfortunately, he's no longer with us. So we want a small moment of silence. Anyways, let's get into our pickups. Tommy, who's your pickup this week?
All right, so my pickup of the week this week is Darrell Williams. He's the backup running back for the Chiefs, and with Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming off an injury, I think he's in for a very big week.
Yeah, and I think that Darrell Williams is a guy who's going to capitalize on the opportunity of a high-flying Chiefs offense that's having to throw the ball a lot to keep up with games. And that's not something that we normally say about running backs, but we've seen how good he is off of screens, and I think that he can be used like that in a similar role to CEH, but maybe outperforming him efficiency-wise.
In the receiving game, I think CEH is honestly a really underrated runner. I don't hate him at all as a running back. I just think it's a really risky option week to week with just how many offensive threats there are to his game. And not only that, Clyde is not just hurt week to week. He's literally on IR now. So Darrell Williams is going to have a big role stepping up.
And he could definitely be a solid RB2, or if not an RB3 on your team if need be, especially with bye weeks now coming. He could be solid for your team, especially depth-wise, over the next couple of weeks, as we saw CEH go down with that terrible injury. Yeah. But, Fraga, who are you picking up off the waiver wire?
My pickup of the week is the first-round pick out of University of Florida, Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney had 10 catches, 189 receiving yards, 13 targets, and 29.6 fantasy points. He has so much potential, especially now with how injury-riddled that Giants receiving core is.
Yeah, and we saw him actually break the Giants' rookie receiving record in terms of yardage in a game, breaking Odell Beckham in his incredible rookie season's record.
That's no small task.
And I feel like, especially this week, he was in for a breakout week, and he had it, especially in a running back that lost Saquon Barkley, offense that lost Saquon Barkley in the middle of the game. He really had that breakout game against Cowboys secondary that really hasn't been playing all that well this year.
Yeah, I mean, he was able to route up Trevon Diggs time and time again, getting catches on him. He had 70 yards on him. He's a guy who I think can be really prolific in the open field, and he's exceptional at breaking tackles, getting himself open.
Especially good after the catch. Especially.
And I think he finally lived up to those expectations that he had coming into draft night, where he went first round to a team that no one really that they expected to go another way, but they went with him, and I think he's finally living up to those expectations.
Totally agree, and that's I'm actually staying with the same offense for my pickup of the week. My pickup of the week is Devonta Booker. Now, Devonta Booker, as you mentioned, is going to be filling in for the injured Saquon Barkley, and it's terrible to see Saquon go down yet again with a gruesome ankle injury. But Devonta Booker could be a good fantasy replacement for Saquon.
Yeah, Saquon is such a fan favorite that it really hurts to see him go down every time. But throughout his entire career, except for the outlier, his rookie season, he seemed to really struggle with those injuries.
Yeah, Devonta Booker actually scored 21 points last game, and Saquon didn't get hurt until the second quarter. So if he has a full game of touches, I think that we can be expecting a solid RB2 stat line, even behind a bad Giants O-line. Mind you, he had 16 carries, 3 receptions, and he had 2 touchdowns, which is kind of showing how they're going to use him both in the passing and run game.
And I feel like that offense is really acclimated towards running backs. Even though they have a bad offensive line, they still have a young quarterback who's still being acclimated into the NFL, so he's using his running backs a lot. And Saquon was the proponent member of that offense, and now that he's gone down, this guy has a really big role to fill, and I think he can fill it.
You say young quarterback. Daniel Jones has already been in the league for 3 years.
It just seems with the rookie mistakes that he continually makes that he's been in the league for longer. And even Daniel Jones, we saw him struggling to stay up after suffering a concussion.
So there, still a question mark there.
He's a question mark. Sterling Shepard is a question mark.
Kenny Golladay.
I mean, the offense's injuries are piling up. We might see Mike Glennon starting at quarterback, which seems bad for fantasy running backs, but the dump-offs might be there.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, if he has 8 catches for 25 yards, he just got you double-digit points. For a running back, too, will not lose you the week.
Exactly.
Tommy, who are you starting across all your formats?
My start of the week is Devonta Smith. Now, he's somebody that at the beginning of the year has been a little bit inconsistent. He's had 19 points, and then the next week he'll have 3 or 4. But I feel like this week and the week before this, he's finally coming out of his shell. The past 3 weeks, he's had over 15 points. And I feel like he's finally starting to build that consistency. He reunited with Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. They were both at Alabama together. And I feel like he's finally starting to build that consistency, and he's becoming a solid wide receiver 1 for the Eagles and a very solid flex or wide receiver 2 in most fantasy formats.
I can absolutely agree with that. Devonta Smith as a prospect was obviously the Heisman winner, big name, and a lot of people were raving for him to be drafted. But like the question mark for him to be drafted was when he was going to go, because his size was a concern. But that size clearly hasn't put him down in the NFL. He's played great as of so far. Definitely a solid option, especially with how solid Jalen Hurts has been playing.
Yeah, and he's definitely shown a knack for getting open, which is one of those traits that you don't measure necessarily combine-wise for receivers. And it's something that's so important. It's that Antonio Brown ability to get the ball into his hands every single time that he runs a route. Devonta Smith possesses it, and I'd like to say that offense, doesn't have that many weapons in terms of the passing game. And I'd like to say that it seems as if reuniting with his college teammate has furthered his career even more with that with the compatibility that they have.
It set him up really nicely for his rookie year.
Absolutely. And Fraga, who are you starting this week across all your formats?
It's a risky choice, but if it pays off, oh my, it's going to pay off. Myles Gaskin dropped 30 points against a Buccaneers defense that was very good against running backs. But the thing is, Myles Gaskin only had 5 attempts for 25 yards, which isn't that good. But then you look at his receiving upside. He had 10 catches and 10 targets out of the backfield for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns, making him one of the top running backs of the week last week after most people were writing him off. And I think against a bad Jacksonville defense, he's bound for a big week again.
Absolutely, and I think that the fact that he plays the Jacksonville Jaguars is helping his case as an RB2 or a flex this week. Now, I'm still nervous about starting any Dolphins player.
Absolutely. It's so risky.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that he only had a handful of carries is also scaring me away from Myles Gaskin. But, again, you said it'd be a risky start. It could pay off because against Jacksonville, if the Dolphins manage to get their second win of the season, it could be a big one.
And especially with the Dolphins' backfield, you look at it, there's not a lot of receiving there. You have Myles Gaskin, who showed his receiving prowess last week. But then you have Malcolm Brown and Salvin Ahmed, who are more power backs, third down backs, who I don't really feel can provide the receiving numbers that Myles Gaskin can provide.
Absolutely. That's why they're getting more carries than Myles Gaskin, and that's why Gaskin's getting more involved in the passing game.
Right.
Yeah, Myles Gaskin definitely is a great matchup. And speaking of guys with great matchups, my start of the week is Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL since making the move to LA. And this week, he gets a juicy matchup against the New York Giants.
Juicy, huh?
Now, the New York Giants, mind you, their run defense is actually pretty solid.
Leonard Williams up front.
But their pass defense has been nothing special this year.
Not at all.
And I would think that the Los Angeles Rams are going to be able to tear up that Giants defense, especially with the fact that the Rams offense might be on the field for 75% of the game, which would just be absurd.
And I feel like just the sheer amount of weapons that are in that Rams receiving core and the weapons they have out of the backfield, Darrell Henderson has proven to be a very consistent back this year. And the receivers have also been stellar, with Van Jefferson being a really proven deep threat, and Deshaun Jackson, everyone thought that he wasn't going to make an impact in the NFL anymore, but here he is catching touchdowns for 70 yards. And that's not even mentioning Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, who a lot of people believe are the most dynamic duo in all of football right now.
And here goes Tommy again talking about Darrell Henderson, thinking he's an RB1 when he so obviously is not.
Flex at best.
Flex at best.
RB2 at best.
But essentially, what we're
Solid
saying
RB2.
is that the Rams' offensive weapons are maybe second to the Bucs, but I don't know how many more teams you can put ahead of them.
There's a lot of potential in that offense. And Matt Stafford is a quarterback that we've raved for so long, just how underrated he is. And when you put a veteran quarterback like that in a Sean McVay system, then, oh boy, he's going to cook.
Yeah, there's a reason why Sean McVay has been the youngest coach in the NFL for like 5 years running. He still hasn't been replaced. Why? Because Sean McVay
Fantastic coach.
He's just that much of a genius on offense. And I think
offensive mind.
Yeah, and actually, it's not even an offensive mind on the sidelines, but Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp have developed a relationship that goes beyond the football field. They're meeting every morning for breakfast. They're sitting down, having meals together, game planning as early as 5 a.m. And I think that's I think that is adding to the fact that Matt Stafford is a legit fantasy option week in and week out, and especially against a decimated Giants team.
Yeah.
But Tommy, this week, who are you sitting across your formats?
I'm sitting Aaron Jones, although that may not be the most popular pick right now, considering he's an RB1 in most formats. I feel like he's just not providing the consistent numbers that a lot of people would need out of an RB1. He had his 44-point game against the Detroit Lions, whose defense they've been playing well this year, but on paper they're subpar. And then when you put him against good defense like the Saints, the Steelers, he's not putting up the numbers that you need out of an RB1. So I feel like this week with a matchup against Chicago, who has Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks in their front seven, I don't think he's going to put up the numbers. I think the game is going to be more scripted to the receiving side. I think Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams would have big games, but this week, Aaron Jones, I'm not feeling him.
Well, I have to actually disagree with you. Aaron Jones is going to get involved in the passing game. That's a given. That's kind of why he's on that team. That's why he got that big extension this offseason. Because if they had him just for running the ball, then he would have been in free agency.
Yeah, and I think that Aaron Jones is actually going to have somewhat of a risky play this week against Chicago, because I can see him going both ways between scoring 25 points and scoring 8 points. But I've never been the biggest Aaron Jones fan. Before the season, I had the chance of drafting him late in the first round, and I opted to draft Austin Eckler time and time again. And at this point,
again.
The right choice.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you guys know that I'm a huge Austin Eckler fan. If you don't, I'm a huge Austin Eckler fan. Aaron Jones, to me, is a mediocre back who's put into a good offense, but I would never expect RB1 numbers from him.
I actually agree with that. His ADP was around a second-round pick, so he's more of a high upside RB2 for me. But I still have to disagree with you there. I think he's going to be pretty good this week.
It's tough to sit a guy who you drafted in the second round, but Frago, who are you sitting this week?
You want to talk about tough to bench a guy you drafted early? What about A.J. Brown, man? What a disappointing season he's had. A.J. Brown's a personal favorite of mine. I loved him coming out of Ole Miss. And he was bound for a big season. Ryan Tannehill was looking to improve. Already how greatly he's improved so far. And not only that, Derrick Henry, the running game, should open up the passing game, and Julio should help open up more routes for A.J. Brown. None of that has happened. And A.J. Brown has been a disaster this week. And he has a really tough matchup being shadowed by Tre'Davious White the majority of the game.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a disappointment, dealing with injuries week in and week out. I think the Titans team as a whole has been disappointing, with the exception of Derrick Henry.
Obviously.
They might have a winning record, but, man, if you lose to the Jets, your season has that taint on it the entire time. And A.J. Brown, besides his week 1 game in which he had a touchdown and only 4 catches, he's been a low-end flex.
He's been a bust, to put it lightly.
As of now, he's been a bust, and we had him as a top 10 receiver, and I still think he can rebound, but I don't think this is the week that he'll start.
I feel like just that Titans offense in general, with the exception of Derrick Henry, as you said, has just been very disappointing. I don't think the connection with Ryan Tannehill and receivers has been there this year at all. I think the implementation of Julio Jones might have had the adverse effect of what was intended. I think that receiving room is not too crowded, but I don't feel like A.J. Brown and Julio Jones complement each other as well with Ryan Tannehill as the Titans hoped that they would.
Yeah, and I mean, my bench of the week is also a guy who's drafted early, who's been disappointing this year. We're hopping back onto the Myles Sanders hate train. Choo-choo. Because Myles Sanders has been nothing short of atrocious this year.
I've never been the biggest Myles Sanders fan at all.
Last week he had 10 points, which was actually a solid game for him. But I still think that he's the second best running back in that backfield, and they are going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers front seven. And a Buccaneers front seven that for the first time in weeks is going to be fully healthy. Jason Pierre-Paul will be playing, Shaq Barrett, Levante David, Devin White. It's a team that has no holes on the defensive side, especially concerning the run defense.
That run defense is stellar.
Yeah, and I think that the Philadelphia O-line is not going to be able to open up holes for Myles Sanders this week.
And actually, I completely agree with you. I've never liked Myles Sanders at all. I've actually had people try to trade him to me. One of them sitting at this table, Mr. Fraga. And I declined offers time and time again because I just don't feel like Myles Sanders is in that upper echelon of running backs. I don't think he can be as productive as people need him to be. I don't think he can be very productive at all. I just don't think he's a valuable asset in fantasy right now.
I mean, for the rest of the season, do you think you would rather have Chuba Hubbard or Miles Sanders?
Chuba as a handicap.
The fact that you would rather handicap than Miles Sanders straight up is scary to the fact that his value is next to nothing. But we'd also like to remind you guys that this week on bye are the Falcons, the Saints, the Jets, and the Niners. So make sure to take those guys out of your lineups as we have our first bye week. So shuffling your lineup might be a little bit tougher this week when you're missing some of those guys. But
this is why drafting for depth can be somewhat important and not overshadowed.
And trading for depth.
No.
Absolutely. Both of those are good strategies. And anything else before we head into week 6?
Fins up.
Oh, thank you guys for joining us. Remember to catch us on the waiver wire.
Keep pounding.